Cell theory is a scientific theory that explains the basic building blocks of all living organisms. It is one of the most fundamental theories in biology and is responsible for your understanding of life at a cellular level. The cell theory has evolved over the years with new discoveries and advancements in technology, where it remains the cornerstones of our understanding of life, and it will be important in your IB in most of all the topics in IB biology.
Of life, and there are three main principles. All living organisms are composed of one or more cells. The cell is the basic unit of life, and that all cells arise from pre-existing cells. These tenets are the foundation of our understanding of life at the cellular level. So to go into more depth, the first principle, that all living organisms are composed of one or more cells. It states that all living organisms are composed of one or more cells, and this means that the simplest single-celled organism to the most complex multicellular organisms are all made up of cells. Cells are the building blocks of life, and they are responsible for carrying out all functions that are necessary for an organism to survive and thrive.
The second tenet, the cell is the basic unit of life. The second tenet of the cell theory states that the cell is the basic unit of life, and this means that all living things, no matter how complex or large, are made up of cells that carry out the functions necessary for life, and the cells are capable of performing all of the basic processes required for life, including obtaining energy, responding to stimuli, and reproducing.
And lastly, all cells arise from pre-existing cells. So this states that cells must arise from pre-existing cells. This means that cells do not spontaneously generate, but instead arise through cell division from other cells. This process is known as cell proliferation and is essential for the growth and development of all living organisms. And while cell theory is a fundamental principle to biology, there are, of course, a few exceptions that have been discovered over the years, and here are some examples. So on the top left, there is a picture of striated muscle fibers. These muscle fibers are multinucleated, and this means that they contain multiple nuclei within a single cell. This goes against the tenet that all living organisms are composed of one or more cells. However, it's important to note that these muscle fibers are formed by the fusion of multiple cells during development. And on the right, we have giant algae. Some algae, such as Acetabularia, are unicellular but can grow to be quite large, up to 10 centimeters in length. These algae have a complex morphology with distinct regions that perform different functions such as photosynthesis and reproduction. This goes against the tenet that the cell is the basic unit of life. Actually, the fact that cells are supposed to be very small units of life. And at the bottom, we have aseptate fungal hyphae. So many fungal hyphae have septates, which section off the cells, as you can see on the left, while on the right, they are aseptate, meaning that they lack the division. And yeah, since they're not partitioned, there is like continuous cytoplasm along the entire hyphae. And this once again challenges the idea that cells are supposed to be discrete and autonomous of each other, similar to the striated muscle cells. And of course, there's also mitochondria and chloroplasts, which are organelles found within eukaryotic cells that have their own DNA and have been thought to have originated from free-living bacteria. This goes against the tenet that cells arise from pre-existing cells, as these organelles are believed to have arisen from endosymbiotic events in which bacteria were engulfed by ancestral eukaryotic cells. While these exceptions and challenges exist, it's important to note that they are relatively rare and do not fundamentally change our understanding of the cellular nature of life. The 7 characteristics of living organisms that we have here, 7. So there is homeostasis, which means that living organisms are able to maintain a stable internal environment despite changes in their external environment. This involves processes such as temperature regulation, pH balance, water balance, and such. And then we have metabolism. So all living things are capable of carrying out chemical reactions that allow them to obtain energy, and they use said energy to sustain life. This involves processes such as cellular respiration and photosynthesis. And then there is growth. So living organisms are able to grow and develop over time, either through cell division or by increasing the size and complexity of their cells. There is sensitivity, so like response to stimuli. Living organisms are able to respond to changes in their environment, such as changes in temperature, light, or sound. And then there's reproduction, so living organisms are able to reproduce offsprings either sexually or asexually. This allows them to pass on their genetic material to the next generation. And then there's excretion, so the ability to remove waste products, and nutrition, so living organisms exchange materials and gases with the environment. And yeah. So these characteristics are not mutually exclusive, and many organisms exhibit many characteristics at once. However, they are fundamental to our understanding of what it means to be a living organism. And surface area to volume ratio is an important concept for understanding the structure and function of cells. As cells grow in size, their volume increases more rapidly than their surface area. This means that a large cell will have a lower surface area to volume ratio compared to smaller cells. This ratio is important for several reasons. First, the surface area of a cell determines the amount of material that can pass through its membrane. For example, nutrients and waste products need to diffuse across the cell membrane in order for the cell to carry out its functions. A cell with a higher surface area to volume ratio will have more membrane available for these processes, allowing it to efficiently exchange materials with its environment. Secondly, the surface area to volume ratio is important for maintaining the cell's internal environment. Cells need to regulate their temperature, pH, and other conditions in order to function properly. A higher surface area to volume ratio allows a cell to more effectively exchange heat and other materials with its environment, helping it to maintain homeostasis. Finally, the surface area to volume ratio is important for cell division. Cells need to replicate their DNA and divide it equally between daughter cells. A smaller cell has a higher surface area to volume ratio, which means it can more efficiently divide its contents and maintain proper function in each daughter cell. So, in summary, the surface area to volume ratio is important for understanding the structure and function of the cell. It determines the efficiency with which cells exchange materials with their environment, maintain homeostasis, and carry out processes such as cell division. And here is a diagram explaining how the volume of the cell increases more rapidly compared to the surface area. And then we have emergent properties. So emergent properties of multicellular organisms are properties that arise from the interaction of individual cells within a multicellular organism and cannot be attributed to any single cell. So these are characteristics that only multicellular organisms can have. And here are some examples of emergent properties. So there is differentiation. So cells within a multicellular organism differentiate into specialized cells. Types with specific functions such as muscle cells, nerve cells, and skin cells. These different types of cells work together to carry out complex functions such as movement, sensation, and protection. And then there is tissue organization. Cells within a multicellular organism are organized into tissues such as muscle tissue, nervous tissue, and epithelial tissue. These tissues have a unique property which arises from the interaction of multiple cells, such as the ability of muscle tissue to contract and generate force. And then there's signal transduction, so cells within multicellular organisms communicate with each other through various signaling pathways, such as hormones and neurotransmitters. These signal pathways allow cells to coordinate their activities and respond to changes in the environment. and also, as previously mentioned, homeostasis, the ability to regulate a stable internal environment, is only capable of multicellular organisms. And adaptation, so multicellular organisms are able to adapt to changing environment conditions, and this involves change in the genetic level as well as change in the structure and function of the cells and tissues. Overall, the emergent properties of multicellular organisms allow them to carry out complex functions and adapt to changing environmental conditions. These properties arise from the interaction of multiple cell tissues and cannot be attributed to any single cell. Once again.